All right, hello and welcome back to another tutorial in Maya. Been on vacation for a couple of weeks, so I'm ready to go. I hope you are as well. Today, we're going to take a look at some really cool stuff with some dynamic curves. And what you're seeing here is just sort of a pseudo pre-simulation of an object bumping into some dynamic curves with some geometry attached. So you can see where the tentacle effect or anything that you need to have kind of organically blowing in the wind or underwater sort of undulating with the waves and stuff. This is what you would use that for, sort of. I mean, you can use it for anything you want, but it's really cool. So essentially, what we're going to do is take a look at how to build a dynamic hair curve system and kind of make it react and do some various things and control these properties, because once you assign a dynamic curve, there's a whole bunch of stuff to think about, and we're going to get to that. So there's a lot to do here. Get yourself a cup of coffee or your favorite beverage and let's get ready to go, because this could take a while. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff to cover, so get ready. All right, so I'm going to pause that for a second. As I was researching this this tutorial, just so happens that on Lester Banks there was another tutorial up there called Creating Abstract Animated Tentacle in Maya by Samir T. And it's a really good tutorial about using this effect and sort of a hair system like what we're going to do, but in a totally different way. So anyway, great tutorial there by Samir T. All right, and while you're over on Lester Banks, check it out. You can now get the official Lester Banks certified computer graphics workwear. That's right. So whether it's formal Monday or casual Friday, you're going to fit in all days of the week. And it's certified by Lester, so it's got to be good. It's got a whole bunch of different designs here, some dealing with After Effects, some with PTEX Heroes. So Lester's, I got this shirt from Lester, and that was great. So thanks, Lester. You did a great job on this store. So I want you to go there and check it out and buy some t-shirts so you look good at work, all right? Nothing better than looking good. And as well, I sort of was looking around for some stuff on dynamic curves before I put this tutorial together to make sure I didn't forget anything. And Andrew Osiow, a chap over on Vimeo, did a great job of showing this same effect, but in a little bit different way, and attaching a volume axis curve. So lots of things to think about here, and he did a great job. So super job, Andrew. Yo-ho. All right, so let's get on with it. I think what we'll do is come down here and just start a new, let's just start a new scene. I'll go ahead and just do a file. We'll save that scene. Let's see, and let's just, actually, I have one that's sort of semi-prepared. So I'm going to go to this scene right here, and I basically just have one thing prepared in here, and that's this kelp-like thing here. So I'll display that. We'll go to show and show selection. I just have like a kelp object in here that we're going to be playing around with later. So just stay tuned for that. All right. So for the meantime, I'm going to hide that selection, and you'll notice it turns gray, so we know it's hid. Okay, so let's build some curves really quick. You may want to just hover in here, press your space bar, come over here, hover in your front, press your space bar, maybe scroll back a little bit and down a little bit. And we want to create a curve, and just a simple curve. So first let's do a CV curve. So I'll go ahead and choose the CV curve tool, and I'm just going to click on here, and I sort of want to do an equal spaced curve just to begin with. So since this is a CV curve tool, I might sort of switch them up a little bit and just do every couple of units, just do a little bit of this and sort of space them out evenly, or as even as I can, and maybe put about 10 or 15 of them on there. I don't know, just sort of. Okay, and when you get your curve, click on your hit your enter key, and now we have our curve. Now I'm going to take that curve and I'm going to do a Command D, Control D, and just sort of duplicate that curve a couple of times. And I'll do another Command D. So we'll do like 3 of the CV curves, and these are all equal, so they're all the same. Now, let's do another thing. Let's create an EP curve. And let's grab our EP curve tool and kind of do the same thing. This is a straight line kind of thing, so I might just do like 1, 2, kind of keep them evenly spaced because dynamic curves sort of like even spacing. So I'll just sort of, click on a curve there and hit enter. And I think what we'll do is do a Command D, Control D if you're on a Windows, and just duplicate that a couple of times. All right. So now we have curves. We have two different kinds of curves. We have our CV curves, which are right here. Might move them over a little bit. And I'll select my EP curves and move them over here a little bit. And as I'm hovering around here, let's just hit the space bar and hover into your perspective and hit the space bar. And now we kind of can see our curves here. And I think I might move all of these curves over a little bit more just to bring them onto the grid. And we'll move this guy over a little bit more. Don't worry about your pivot point for the moment. It can make a difference, but the reason that we're creating two different kinds of curves here is to show you how they react together. These CV curves are going to react differently than EP curves when you create dynamic curves. So with that in mind, let's just do that. Let's create our systems right up on the start. So go ahead and select your first three curves right there. That should be curve 1, 2, and 3. And what we'll do is make sure you're in your animation menu set, or dynamics menu set. Go to your dynamics. We're going to come to hair, and we're going to actually assign a hair system. Now you could also use make selected curves dynamic, but we're going to get a few more options with our assign hair system. So they're basically the same, but this just gives us a few more options to roll with. All right. So now that I created that hair system, you'll notice that it does have a root node. And if you notice in your tabs over here, you'll have all sorts of stuff that you can start messing with. Okay, we'll get to that. But first we want to assign another hair system to these over here. So let's grab our other set of curves right here. That'd be curve 4, 5, and 6. And we'll do the same thing. We'll go to hair and we'll just create assign a hair system. Now, if I wanted to basically assign them to the system that we just created, I would click this. That's if you're adding new hairs later. But in this case, I'm going to go with a completely new hair system. So we'll have two separate hair systems. So there's my hair system 2, and there's my hair system 1. All right. Well, let's take a look at what happens really quickly when we set our timeline to about 500, and we'll just go ahead and hit play. And right away you'll notice that you have some curves that are doing some different kinds of stuff, which is really cool. So we need to be aware that these are now our active, dynamic curves, and these are just the static curves that we produced to begin with. And just by default, they have a little bit of gravity attached to them, and all of these can be found in the hair shape 1 or the hair shape 2 system for this guy. Okay. So let's just sort of pause there for a second and come up here and take a look at something. First, we're going to look at the hair system 1, which is attached to these guys. That's our CV curves. And you'll notice that the CV curves operate or react a little differently than EP curves. I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and we'll look at the difference. These kind of have a little bit different motion up here, and these a little bit down there. Okay. Well, the first thing you want to be aware of in these curve systems is that the gravity has a little bit to do with everything. And if you go into your tabs, just kind of scroll down to your dynamics section, and we're going to have some different things to play with, iterations and stiffness. Let's look at the stiffness first because we can kind of really mess around with that. And go ahead and set to the beginning and hit play and just reduce that stiffness a bit. Okay, and you'll see what happens to your curves. It sort of relaxes them and makes them more like hair. Okay, so I'll bring that stiffness up a little bit. And you'll notice they're going below the ground plane. There's a certain point where they break over this ground plane. And in some cases you might want that. A lot of cases, who knows, you might not want that. So I'm going to bring the stiffness down even a little more so they go well below that ground plane. All right, and there we go. I'm going to do the same maybe with these guys too over on this system. So let's take a look at hair system number 2, and I'll go to hair system number 2. And let's take a look what happens when we mess around with the same thing. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to mess around with their stiffness. So let's go into our values here under dynamics and look at our stiffness value and maybe bring that stiffness down a little bit on those, maybe till they just start to fall. And sometimes you have to wait till it goes back to the beginning. All right, and you can see they're fairly uniform because I just copied this one to that one to that one, and this one to that one to that one. So they should have pretty much, the same starting, uniformity. And then we're going to switch it up with some turbulence. So there you go. But look at this. When they hit the ground plane right there, you may want them to actually stop on this ground plane. And if you come down into your dynamics section and you look at your collisions, these are what we're interested in. We do have collide on by default. And you could always oversample this a little bit. It gives you a little bit better collision sampling. But we want these to basically collide with this ground plane, which is at 0 right now, and it's at 0 right there. So now that I switch that on, you can see where the curves sort of come down here and boom, they hit the ground plane. Now I didn't switch the ground plane over here for these. I switched it for these guys over here. All right, so now we have the ground plane set and they're all doing kind of the same thing, which is really cool. You might want to do something that's in unison or something like that with curves, who knows. But that's just an easy way of looking at it to begin with. Great. Now let's look at a couple of other things. You noticed where this hair system 2, and be careful because you want to be in your hair system 2. We're playing around with these properties. Let's switch up the turbulence on these a little bit. I'll go back to the beginning and hair system 2 and come down and look at your dynamics section and your forces. Well, actually, let's see here. We want to be in our turbulence section. And we're going to add a little bit of turbulence and kind of mess around with that. So we'll go back to the beginning, let those come down, throw a little turbulence on there, and you can see where the turbulence is now making those things go kind of do their own thing, which is really cool. Now it's going to be a give or take situation. Sometimes you need to come back up here and vary your stiffness and things like that once you get a simulation going. Let's look at this stiffness right here. Now that I added some turbulence, I might want to pull up that stiffness a little bit to give them a little bit more, kind of like a free-flowing kind of thing. All right, so I'll pull that stiffness up a little more. So there we go. So now we have dynamic curves that are kind of, kind of acting like the way we want them to in water. These could be in wind or whatever. But underwater, we know the buoyancy is going to pull things up. So anyway, just something to be aware of. Now that's really cool. Okay, well, let's look at a couple of things here. We can select, like, say, one of these curves in this system. And let's take a look at the outliner over here. When I select this curve, we can see that it is attached to follicle number 4. And let's look at curve number 4. We actually want to see what this dynamic curve is right here. So if I look at my output curves, I can see that's curve number 10. All right. So let's see here. Let's get back to this one over here. Curve 4 is the original curve, and then basically it is. Let's see. I'm going to drop these down. Okay. So if I click on that one, it is actually the new output curve is curve number 10, and it's actually attached to follicle shape number 4. Okay, so if I click on follicle 4 and click on follicle 4 here, it's basically telling me that I'm on that follicle. Okay, so you kind of have to look at what you're navigating here, because if we individually select a follicle or curve on a follicle, we're going to get the shape over here, and then we're also going to get some other options to either override the overall hair system, which is kind of cool. So let's go back here to the beginning, and I'm going to basically click on Override Dynamics, and I'm going to hit play. All right. Well, right now it's going to do something a little different, but watch this. I have individual control over this follicle now for its dampening and its stiffness. So if I bring stiffness all the way up just on that one follicle, you can see where it's starting to do its thing by being, sort of attached to that curve, or I can control its individual stiffness, which is really cool. So I can bring that down a little bit. I can put a little bit of dampening on it to kind of slow down that reaction. So lots of different things you can do right here. The length of flex just lets it be a little more rubber band like. Gives it a little bit more stretch, or medium stretch, or no stretch. So you can play around with that to also see what's happening. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go back to our other system over here. Let's go over to this hair system 1, and we'll go back into the beginning and take a look at what's happening. And we see those falling. I might want to come up and actually stiffen those up a little bit. So we'll come up into the stiffness. There we go. And bring our stiffness up a little bit. All right. And sometimes you have to wait, of course, till the beginning of the simulation and kind of see where that kicks in. And I might want to bring that stiffness down a little bit. Okay, so I'll bring that down. Yeah, we'll bring it down about there. We'll see what happens, and then we'll switch it on with some turbulence. All right. Okay, so I'm going to push pause there, and we're going to basically add a little bit of turbulence. So I'm going to take the turbulence and set the intensity up to, like, say 0.1, whatever. And I want to go ahead and put on self-collide and collide with ground, and maybe even draw a collide with. For right now, just leave these on: collide, self-collide, and collide with ground. All right, and I'm going to go back to the beginning. Let's do a quick thing like that, and now we can see where those are colliding with the ground as well. And might want to mess around with my gravity a little bit in here. We'll bring the gravity down just a little bit, and you'll notice where that'll start to help these pull back up. All right, so lots of different stuff that's interacting here. I hope you can kind of see the difference. And remember, these are CV curves and these are EP curves. So the EP curves seem to have a little bit more smooth flow to them, and these seem to have a little bit more bend and things like that. So with that in mind, let's make some geometry and attach some tentacles to these. Okay, so I think what I'll do is go back into, well, I will stay in this view here, in the perspective view, and I'll just go to my home position, and I'll create a polygon primitive cylinder, and I'll just sort of draw a little cylinder out there and just sort of give it its thing. Okay, you'll notice that I have one cap on it. On this cylinder right here, there are no caps. I just have a single surface, which is cool, because what I want to do is I want to extrude this kind of along these different faces. So I'll maybe just make a copy. I'll just do a duplicate of that and move this over in the middle, and do a duplicate of that and move this over into the middle. All right, now let's go to the first one in the series right here and just click on its geometry. And then what you want to do is shift click on the actual curve, and then come down here and hover over your object and go into face mode and shift click that front face right there. And if you're in your polygon menu set, come over into your edit mesh and go down to your extrude, and you'll notice it does something kind of weird there. It sort of extrudes it up along there. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna go to undo and undo. I think I'm going to undo that for a second. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, we do want to select that face. Okay. So I was just thinking that I did that in the wrong order, because it looks kind of different because it's going straight up like this, but that's okay for the moment. What we want to do is come over and set its divisions. And so let's look in the attribute editor under here, I mean the channel box, and come down to the divisions of that cylinder and switch the divisions up to something more like 30 maybe, and let's see what happens. Okay, so you can see where, you know, it was attached to that curve. It just didn't look like it because we didn't have enough divisions on there to kind of give it, you know, any kind of depth. So that's cool. All right, well, while we're in this object right here, we can mess around with its taper. And I'm going to go ahead and taper this to, say, like a -5, just sort of make it taper off to the top. If you wanted it to go the other way, you could always do like a +5 and make it go out the top there. Yeah, that might be kind of extreme, so maybe a +2 might be something you like. I don't know. I think we'll go, because tentacles, we'll go with the -1 space. We'll see what happens. That looks pretty good. So you'll just want to do the same thing for the other curves here. You want to select your geometry and shift select your dynamic curve. There, all right. Actually, you got to go back into object mode. Go ahead and select your object and then shift select your curve, and then go over onto your object, go into face mode, shift select your face, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to edit mesh and extrude. And then we're actually going to give it those divisions. So we'll put divisions at 30, all right, and a taper to, say, -5 or -1 or -2. I don't know. It's up to you. All right, so let's go back on here, go back into object mode, select your object, and we're going to shift select the curve, and then come over here, go back to face mode on top of that, shift select that face, and edit mesh and extrude. And we'll do the same thing with divisions. Let's give it a division of 30, and let's go to a taper of, say, like a -2, and there we go. Okay, so you can see where we just assign that geometry now to those curves. So let's see what happens when we go back and hit play. You go ahead and see what's going on with these guys. So those look pretty cool. All right, they're doing their tentacle thing. All right, so there you go. We've got some tentacles, and they're moving around, and they're doing their thing. Now, let's see. The next thing you need to be aware of is these things can collide. So let's make sure that they're colliding with each other. I'm going to go ahead and stop this for a moment. We're going to take a closer look at these guys. We'll go back into object mode and just sort of get straight there. And I'll go ahead and come over into the main system. Like, this is hair system 1, so I want to make sure I'm on hair system 1. And we'll go ahead and get back into our tabs here. Let's get in there, and we got our hair system tab. Now, let's look at this start curve attract real quick, because the curve attraction right here is going to have an effect on these guys. Like, if I were to, say, have just a little bit more gravity on them. Okay, I'm going to raise the gravity a little bit just to give them a little bit more flow. And if I want them to be attracted more to these curves, these original curves, that's where this comes in. So if I play around with the start curve attract, remember, you can animate these values as well. So, you know, this curve attraction, if I reduce it, you can see where they start to do what they want to do. And there they go. But if I want to increase the curve attraction, all I got to do is just sort of pull up on this bit over here and set my values up a little higher for the curve attract. And if it's all the way on, of course, they'll hardly move. And if it's all the way off, well, they're going to have quite a bit of movement, and they're not going to be attracted to this original curve. All right, so concept you need to know. All right, now oversampling, it always helps to bring a couple of onto the oversampling, but right here, when we see that draw collide with, we want these things to collide, and we do have them colliding. We've got them self-colliding and colliding with other stuff if they want, but for the moment, let's see what this draw collide with is. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop, and I'm going to go back to the beginning here. And I do have the width on, but I'm not seeing anything. And when you activate your collide width, you should be able to come up here into the Let's get up here into the right scale here, and the width offset from the collide. And I'm going to bring this width offset up quite a bit. Okay, so there they are. They were hiding, all right? So sometimes in order to see your collide width, how, like where things are going to collide, you need to bring this collide width offset up, okay? So now I can see these where they're at, and we can actually know where they're going to collide. Now, the draw collide width is basically it's skipping 2 iterations or 2 divisions. So if I put this down to like draw width skip at 0, and then click at the beginning to go back and activate the beginning of the animation, now you can see I have a lot more indicators here. And sometimes you need to bring this up to a value of 2 or 3 or more. So if I bring that up to a value of 2 right there, you can see where these surfaces are going to start bumping into each other at about this point. So that's a little extreme. I think I'll bring them down to just sort of cover the surfaces there. And we'll go back to the beginning and we'll do a play, and we'll see if we can make these things collide with each other. All right. We may have to introduce a little bit more turbulence. So I'm going to come down here and give us a little bit more intensity on the turbulence. We'll go back to the beginning. And from here on out, it's just a process of playing with all these different concepts. And, you can attach different fields to these. You can do all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to mess around with the frequency here a little bit, see if I can make these bump into each other. And yeah, let's see. See, you can see where sometimes the geometry sort of penetrates itself, and you don't really want that. So what you may have to do is bring your repulsion up, all the way to 1 or more, maybe repulsion up to 2, and just sort of keep refining it like that. And at some point you'll get the effect you want. Now, static cling, you don't really want things clinging necessarily. You could bring your collide neighbors up a little bit, and that just helps sort of helps these divisions figure out how they're going to calculate. I mean, of course, I'm getting a little bit of wonky stuff right now, but this is where working with dynamic curves can take hours and hours and hours. All right, so it's good to know some of this stuff. Now, I may want to do a couple of things here. I could increase my offset. Let's see here, I'm at 1 now. I could increase this offset to say like 1.5, and that's my collision offset now. Makes it a little wider, and then that way you can see where these sort of have an influence on each other. And we can add static cling. Just go ahead and feel free to play around with some of these properties at will, and just see what they do. Try and do a controlled experiment. I'm going to let this play through to the beginning. See, and that's way too much. So static cling in this case isn't really doing us any good. You can see where it's clinging a little bit. I'm going to take that value down to like a -1. And yeah, and you can always raise this ground height. The collision ground height, I'm going to go ahead and say bring this, I'm going to bring this collide on the ground like up quite a bit. And we'll see that the ground plane now is up here, okay? There it is. So you can bring your ground plane down, or you can bring your ground plane up. So you can take it there, we can take the ground plane down to here. So you have a lot of variability, all right? Okay, so I think you get the idea. I hope this is not too long-winded, but you kind of have to be aware of all these different things that are going on with dynamic curves, okay? So hey, thanks for watching, and as always, be a good person, like I know you guys are, because you watch deep-fried ectoplasm tutorials. But I know you're not reading the book, so get that owner's manual and read it. Go to your help section, ask questions there first, Google first, and then maybe ask me. All right? So anyway, have a good time, and there you go. Thanks for watching.